welcome to another edition of Pop and Scott Talk Baseball. Boy, we getting down to the end, Dad. What? I mean, just
it's going to go to the last day.
What were we talking? What were you talking about? It's going to take till the final day, right?
It's going to be the last day because there's the Dodgers and the Braves have clinched. It looks like Milwaukee's going to win the Central, but in both leagues, the wild card is going to go to the last day because nobody's grabbing the bull by the horns. I mean, right. Texas, who I thought was in bad shape last week because their bullpen wasn't doing much, and then they had to go to Toronto for 4 games. They go in there and sweep. So then I think, well, Toronto's done. Well, wait, Toronto wins a couple of games. Oh, I thought Seattle was going to make a run for the West title. Well, wait a minute, Seattle can't win. Pardon me, Houston's leading. Wait a minute, Houston can't beat Kansas City. Baltimore lost 2 games to the Cardinals of all people, and then lost 2 to 10. I said last week they might be 4 games back, but do not sleep on Tampa. That team, that organization knows how to win. And sure enough, last night, going into the Oriole game last night, they were tied, and the Orioles beat them last night. And then they're behind today. Tampa was leading 1-0 in the second inning today. But if Tampa wins today, they're tied for first place. But the big key is here.
1 game back.
If they Baltimore won last night, so they won the season series. So if they end in a tie, Baltimore wins their division because of the tiebreaker.
Well, I just hope the announcer didn't say, "Hey, this is the first time that Baltimore's won a season thing or for 40 years because he might lose his job." But that's crazy.
Well, I mean, there's still several. I mean, there's still a couple weeks of games left. It's
October 1st is the last day of regular season.
Yeah, it's
3 weeks, 2 weeks,
something like that. I mean, Baltimore's playing the Rays today. Then they have 3 at the Astros, 3 at Cleveland, or 4 at Cleveland. Then they have 2 with the Nats at home and 3 with the Red Sox at home. So that's 5, 4 is 9, 14 games.
We said last week they were 4 back, and then you said, "Oh, they got to play a 3-day game weekend." I was like, "Well, that puts them right back in it because when you play head to head, you can get plenty of." Gain some games. But I mean, Minnesota's all but I don't know how many games they're back from clinching. Minnesota should
nobody's going to catch them.
Yeah. And Houston's only a half game in first. Seattle's 1.5. This AL West is starting to be a fun game.
Nobody wants to win it.
Yeah, it's just.
I have a saying that drives your stepmother crazy. You got to want to win.
Right.
And what I mean by that is you got to have it in here. You have got to want to win. You have to put out maximum effort. You can't just throw your hat on the field and say, "Well, I think I'll take a day off."
Right.
You have to want to, or a playoff. I mean, you have to want. That's what I mean by want to win. And nobody in that league and nobody in that division wants to grab it by the horns. Like I said, I thought Texas looked like they were going to run away with it. Then they couldn't win. Their bullpen was in shambles. Then they go into Toronto and sweep Toronto. Then they come out of Toronto and lose 2 games.
Well, here's the team that Los Angeles Angels. We want to talk about people that don't want to play anymore. They don't want to play no more. You got Ohtani just said he's done. They put him on IL pretty much.
His oblique, and he's going to have a surgery on his elbow, and they cleaned out his locker.
Yeah, I think his people cleaned out his locker the way it sounds. And I don't know if that oblique is as bad as they're claiming it is. So I think he's just done. I think he was just like, "See you later. Let me go get this surgery on my arm and get that."
And Trout wants to sit down with management too.
From what it sounds, he's grumbling for a trade. But I just, they're going to want maximum trade value, and I just don't see it happening. So Atlanta's clinched. Milwaukee is 6.5. They kind of
That's it.
really distance
They have
themselves
to
from
lose
the
every game from here on in.
right. And then the Dodgers have clinched, of course.
Well, Atlanta too. That's their 23rd division title since 1969.
Yeah, but I just don't put a lot of stock into divisional type. You know, when
I
you
mean, it
won a
sounds
pennant
nice,
back
but
in the day for,
they won 2 World Series.
yeah, that's at the end of the day, that's what you're playing for. Especially in a 4 or 5 team division that they have now. Winning that really doesn't mean a hill of beans.
Yeah, I mean, they show these. They're celebrating on the field and they're shooting champagne. I said, you haven't won anything. A division means nothing. you got some games to play yet. The division championship means absolutely nothing. It just means you're going to have home field. That's it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we've learned. I mean, we've seen World Series where none of the games were won by the home team. We've seen some crazy stuff in the last few years. So.
And also, Olsen hit his 52nd home run last night, and they got stomped by Miami. But he hit his 52nd home run, and that broke Andrew Jones' record, 51, for the Atlanta Braves. See, and to me, I was a big Braves fan for a long time, and because of their farm team in Richmond and all that, and they were on Team West. And this looks like they're looking a lot like the '90s, where they came through, and then they get into the playoffs. Their pitching's not quite that great, and
what have they played for this year? They went out to a lead, and it's tough to week in and week out with the lead they have, and then all of a sudden everybody's back at game one in the playoffs, and now you got to go another level. You got to find that gear, and they've been just cruising the whole year.
And you're right. And the only thing they've been playing for is trying to get the number 1 seed all the way through, so they even the World Series.
Right. So
that's all they've had to play for because nobody's challenged them.
Here's the good thing about Baltimore. I've been wearing my Baltimore hat a lot. Really pulling for this team. Really, I can't watch them, but I try to keep up with them as much as I can. So Baltimore, even if they do fall behind Tampa, they're still going to make the playoffs easily.
Yes.
Easily.
They only have to have one more game.
Right. And I mean, that is the plus of it all. You know, we got Toronto still a half game ahead of Seattle. So and here, you know, Yankees and Boston fans. I know Yankees are having they got a winning season right now.
Boston, and they've won quite a few games lately.
Right. And they're one game under 500. But look, they're still in the halfway of the American League. I mean, when you look at it at the end of the day, there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that are worse than them.
In Boston,
than Boston. And you know, I have a buddy at work that can't stand that Boston's behind New York. I go, they're playing for nothing. What do you even care? I was like, at least he's finding a fun something. You know, they want to be in front of the Yankees. I was like, what does it mean?
Well, my buddy lives a few doors behind me. He's a big, huge Yankee fan, and he's in his 80s. And he said, I said, well, look, they're winning. And he said, this is making it even worse. He said, when they were losing, it didn't hurt so bad because they stunk. He said, now they're playing halfway decent. Now I'm going, why haven't you done this all year?
Yeah. So got a few more weeks of Detroit and the great there. Like I said, the Angels have given up. White Sox again, just another disappointing year. Kansas City, and we'll do an end of the year wrap up here in a few weeks. So we'll get to the National League, which is Atlanta Dodgers already clinched. Milwaukee is all but clinched. But here's where the race gets interesting. The American League got tighter, which I didn't think was going to happen.
Right.
But the National League, here we go. I mean, Arizona, Cincinnati are tied. The Cubs are a half game up on them. And Miami is a half game behind Cincinnati.
And I'm surprised Miami's hanging with them because Miami had a tough schedule.
Right.
But they've hung in there.
San Francisco, 2.5, so they're not totally out of it.
But they're playing like they are. They've lost 4 and 5 in a row.
Right. And San Diego, the team, I'm just going to point this out. Yep, 7 games under 500. But, again, there's teams that are worse than them. And that was one of the teams at the beginning of the year we thought they were going to fight the Dodgers, and they just what a letdown that team is. Just on paper, just too good. We'll talk more about them later. But I look at Washington. There was people not thinking they were going to win 35 games this year. They got 65 wins.
Yeah, they've lost quite a few lately. They brought up and started playing a bunch of kids, and they're they're losing, but they're playing a bunch of kids, and they don't. And their weakness is their pitching. And that pitching is the key to baseball. It has been forever. And I mean, if you don't have the pitching, you don't win. Yeah. You have to have. I mean, the Atlanta Braves had pitching in the 90s as far as starters. Their bullpen was iffy, but they had one of the best starting staffs ever. Their problem in the playoffs was they couldn't hit because when they were facing good pitching, they couldn't hit, couldn't score runs. And so your grandfather used to say, well, son, they can't hit. They can't hit against the good pitching in the playoffs in the World Series. That's why they can't win them. And they can hit this year, but I'm not so sure about their pitching. I still got a funny feeling that when they get in those short series that the Phillies are going to have something for everybody like they did last year. I don't know why. I just got that feeling. And I might be wrong because they were talking on MLB there that they showed some statistics, and the Phillies bullpen is not as good as it was last year. And they wasn't great last year.
So I talked to some of my Philly friends, and they were saying that it looks like fatigue. They put in a lot of innings in the second half of the year. So hopefully they can. They should rest them as much as they I know it's tough to say that. You got to still play the games, but they're so far out in that first playoff spot. What are you playing for at this? You can't win a division, and you're not going to lose the first playoff spot. So rest some arms, man. I just would try to I would tell a pitcher, start the pitcher, hey, go out there, throw strikes. We're going to try to get 100 pitches from you and try to get 7 innings, man. And let's just rotate guys. I know it's easier said than done, but, pitch to contact, try to get through these games. So with that being I usually start off by what's going on, have you seen anything, talked about anything, heard anything, anything catching your eye around the league, Dad?
I saw watching highlights. I didn't see the game. Watching highlights, same thing I talked about last week. Saw it again with San Francisco. Catcher's down on one knee. They're trying to get in the playoffs, and he's on one knee. Ball's going outside. He doesn't even try to shift his weight. He tries to backhand the ball. The ball hits the mitt and goes over by the dugout, and the winning run scored. I mean, it's they're not going to learn. I mean, they're just going to stay on that one knee trying to frame pitches, and it's costing them ball games, and you're theoretically playing for a playoff spot.
Right.
It makes absolutely no sense. I don't understand what the management what are they thinking? What is the management, the coaching, and all that in these organizations? What are they thinking? How much proof? If an old guy sitting in Colonial Heights can watch highlights and see 3 games lost last weekend and 1 yesterday because of that, and they can't see it, there's a problem. Now, there's one team that does see it. Baltimore. Their catchers stay in the crouch. They very rarely go on one knee. Right. Russian caught the whole game the other night and caught it in the crouch. The whole game.
Yeah, I know it, for how many pitches they say they get a game. A lot of that is just also bad umpiring.
Exactly.
Support.
The umpiring is horrible on balls and strikes. It's
right.
not just one guy.
Right, right. I've been watching more and more highlights of that on YouTube. Uh, and it's always been with umpiring, when playing or coaching or whatever, you're going to miss strikes, but be consistent where you miss. If you're going to miss to the left or whatever, outside, be consistent. Don't one inning do that, and then the next inning you be high or low, or you're calling that inside strike that wasn't there before. Just be consistent with your strike zone for heaven. And
Yeah,
then
because if you're
that's the problem
consistent,
I'm
if you're
having.
consistent with the strike zone, the batters will adapt to the whatever strike zone you have. If you're
Well, and
calling
that,
outside pitches strikes the whole game, they'll adapt to it. But like you said, if they call outside pitches a strike one inning and then 2 innings later they're not,
right.
now the batter, then the ball's inside and he calls it a strike. The batter's not going to know what to do.
Well, it came out a few years back. I never forget watching this, where it depended on what side that the umpire set up on, where his tendencies were.
Right.
And I'm like, but these guys are supposedly the pros, the professionals. They probably seen enough games where they should be. It don't matter if they're sitting in the third row in the bleachers; they should be able to call balls and strikes. These guys, this isn't their first games ever. I mean, they had to come up through the ranks as well. I saw a tryout with 150 umpires or a camp or something. A lot of youngsters, and one was a teenager. That's who I was watching. And I mean, I thought about it when I was younger, going through that too. And part of me wishes I could, because I would love to see a 99-mile-an-hour fastball coming in at tails and try to call it a ball at the strike. You're listening for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I umpired high school baseball for 3 years, and I umpired slow pitch softball off and on for 20. But I mean, it's it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. But I was I was a high school umpire. I was not in the major leagues. And these major league umpires are missing balls and strikes this year way worse than they ever had before. And they say that when the leagues have come out with their reports, it's showing it, that the reports are showing it.
Yeah, and we talked about it before, where we wish partly where they take the boxes down off the screen. But man, some of these have just been so blatant bad calls. I don't care if they didn't have a box up there or they had a pizza box up there. It wouldn't matter. I could tell. I'm not blind. So it's just, I wish they were just a little bit more consistent on their misses to one side. Because, I mean, that's back in the day when we used to joke about Maddox and the Maddox strike, which would be a foot. Glavine. Those guys would be in the left-handed batter's box a foot in. But, they just start on the corner and start moving further and further out and see where the strike zone was. I don't think with a lot of these guys you can do that now. It would change from inning to inning. The umpire would notice, oh, man, I'm missing that. And part of that makes me wonder, is New York in their ear going, hey, you're missing outside, during the game?
It could be. It's possible.
We could never know that. We don't know what's going on between innings, what communication's going on. So, and I know they get reports on them, I think weekly, if not, I know they get reports written up on them on how they're doing. So, they could be over, going too far one way or the other. But you talked about, I know my man Pete Alonso hit his 45th the other day as well. He keeps moving along. He's just, me and my buddies are talking about, is there a chance he can get 500? I do the math, and it's just tough for me to see him get that number. Even with now the DH being in the national, it just, if he stayed as a Met. So I don't, it'll be tough because I think he's already 27, 28. And I mean, he is just a beast. And he's starting to get more and more little injuries every year where he misses some significant portion. This year was only about 2 or 3 weeks. But he's playing on a bad team, trying to get the season done with a bunch of young guys around him. But what's also helped is Lindor has actually had a pretty good second half of the season. So batting in front of him.
Yeah, they've the Mets have played somewhat better the second half, but still
mediocre at best. I mean, yeah.
They were so far behind when they got to they were just treading water, and it was.
And I think some of the guys, like I was really high on, that people in New York are high on. You know, things could change after this year, but they might be 4A players, not, you know.
Well, see, the other guy, the guy that the league finally, and I knew this was going to happen because it happens to all of them, they finally caught up with De La Cruz. And, and they haven't even been playing him against left-handed pitching because he was he was like 1 for 29 against left-handers. And so they just started benching him against left-handers.
Right. And he's a guy that you got to figure out to get him on base because with his speed, it doesn't matter. You know, he doesn't need to put it in the second row. He can disrupt the game. He's Ricky Henderson, man. Also, I mean, he could just disrupt the man stole 3 bases on 2 pitches, including home plate. I mean, that's just remarkable what he does, not just at the plate. And there's other the Mets have Ronnie. I'm still trying to learn his name. I've been waiting on him for years. And Mauricio, he's kind of built the same way, plays the same way. He doesn't have the power, home run power. I don't think he's going to have those numbers, but he's playing second base, so they don't really need those numbers from him. But I'm bringing up a lot of Mets stuff, and I usually don't. It's because that's the team we're going to touch on. And this time of year, I kind of want to start touching on what teams have and need to move on. I mean, so Scherzer's out for the year with that trade seems to have been the best trade ever for the Mets.
Verlander smoked the last couple of times he's pitched. Right.
And so they got some great talent, young talent. They have a great minor league system right now because of that. So hopefully the future is bright for them. But since we've been talking a little bit of the future of them, let's talk about the short pass that they've had, comparatively speaking to some other teams we talked about. Take it away, Dad.
All right. The New York Mets, which is short for the Metropolitans, they, of course, have been playing in the Queens in New York, and they're in the National League East, a killer division because they're in there with Atlanta and Philadelphia and Miami and a young Washington team. They and the Yankees are the 2 teams that are still in New York. The Dodgers and the Giants were there at one time. So when I was a kid, there was 3 teams there. It was one of Major League Baseball's first expansion teams. It was founded in 1962 to replace the 2 departed National League teams, the Giants and the Dodgers. The team's colors are blue and orange. They adopted the blue from the Dodgers and the orange from the Giants, and that's how they got their colors. For the 1962 and 63 seasons, they played their home games in the old Polo Grounds in Manhattan before moving to Queens. From 1964 to 2008, they played their home games at Shea Stadium, named after William Shea, the founder of the Continental League, which was a proposed 3rd major league that never got off the ground, because when he announced he was going to do that, all of a sudden Major League Baseball made the Mets their expansion team. They weren't going to take a chance on having that 3rd team. Since 2009, the Mets have played their home games at Citi Field, next to the site where Shea Stadium once stood. In their inaugural season, the Mets posted a 40 win, 120 loss record, the worst regular season record since Major League Baseball went to the 162 game schedule. The team never finished better than second to last in the 1960 until the Miracle Mets beat the Baltimore Orioles in the 1969 World Series, considered one of the biggest upsets in Major League history. Despite the fact, people forget, that year the Mets won 100 games. They weren't exemplary. They weren't a bunch of chump change. That was, that was Tom Seaver, Jerry Koosman, and a young kid. I guess he turned out pretty good, named Nolan Ryan, who came out of the.
He wasn't that good with the Mets. That's the reason
no,
why
because he was throwing the ball 100 miles an hour. Had no idea where it was going.
Right. Yeah.
But he started with them. The Mets have qualified for the postseason 10 times, winning the World Series twice, in 1969, as I stated before, and in 1986, and winning 5 National League pennants, most recently in 2000 and 2015, and 6 National League East Division titles. Since 2020, the Mets have been owned by billionaire hedge fund manager Steve Cohen, who is generally regarded the richest major league owner now. He purchased the team for $2.4 billion. And as of 2022, the Mets are ranked as the 6th most valuable Major League Baseball team, valued at $2.65 billion. At the end of the 2022 regular season, the team's overall win-loss record is 4,652 wins, 4,988 losses, for a 483 average. Now, there again, during the 60s until the end of that decade, they were awful. I mean, they were an expansion team, and they played like it.
Yeah, and they don't have a long enough history yet to catch up for that decade.
Exactly. Now, in the 1960s, the team, the Metropolitans, was named. It was from 1880 to 1887. That was a team from New York that was in the old American Association. In 1962, they had that worst record of 40 wins and 120 losses. My favorite player finished his career playing for the Mets. In 1963, Duke Snider accomplished 2 things. He had his 2,000th hit and his 400th home run as a Met. And he was voted.
There's some great players that have finished their careers with the Mets.
Right. And see, he was voted onto the All-Star team that year for the Mets. But see, here's the deal. With the expansion team, they took the old players from the teams, like the Warren Spahns of the world. Casey Stengel was their manager. He was 112.
Yeah. People saw him as the greatest.
Now, here's Warren Spahn. Warren Spahn pitched for Casey Stengel when Casey Stengel was a rookie manager with the Boston Braves. And Warren Spahn was a rookie with the old Boston Braves before they moved to Milwaukee. They didn't have a very good team. Then he pitched for him again when he managed the Mets. Stengel managed the Mets in 62 and 63. And Spahn said, and of course, Stengel was the manager of the Yankees when they had all, they won all those world championships. And he said, I played for Casey before and after he was a genius.
Right.
Because when he managed the Yankees and won all those world championships, he was considered a genius. But but Spahn played for him at the beginning of his career and at the end when they had bad teams. But anyway.
Well, I mean, and Yogi Berra played there. And
and Mays. Here again, 1966. Well, here's something. In the draft, they passed on Reggie Jackson and took Steve Silcott. But in 67, in the lottery, they got Tom Seaver. And that was 2 years before they won 100 games and then won the 69 World Series. In 1973, they lost to the Oakland A's in 7 games after they beat the Big Red Machine to get to the World Series. In 1977, they traded. I just
want to interject real quick. The Tom Seaver pickup was great in several ways. He was a big igniter for the 69 season. But him and his wife were like the talk of the town. They were like the king and queen of New York. The kind of New York Mets kind of needed something like that to kind of make them legitimate, almost like a ball team, somebody, a reason to watch. That I just wanted to show that there's
well, if memory serves me correctly, in that victory over the Big Red Machine, in 73, I believe that's when, was it Harrelson and Rose got in a fight at second base? Was it 73?
I can't remember. I can't.
But anyway,
I
remember that was in the playoffs.
Rose fought a lot, so it doesn't.
And well, they traded him, and when they traded Seaver to Cincinnati, it was known as the Midnight Massacre because the Mets fans were just crushed. And then in the mid-1980s, they didn't do much after that. Then in the mid-1980s, the club got turned around again when they got Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden, Gary Carter, and Ray Knight. Played
also for the traded for Keith Hernandez from the Cardinals.
Right. And so then Davey Johnson was their manager. And, of course, in 1986, they won the World Series when in Game 6, the famous ball going between the legs of Bill Buckner, the Red Sox first baseman, and they won the Game 6 and came back and won Game 7.
I'm going to interject, and you pointed this out before, too. I still think Bill Buckner looked up and saw no pitcher and tried to make a play on his own. And that's why the ball went through his leg.
He took his eye off the ball.
Yeah, he knew he had to rush it because the pitcher
wasn't covering the bag. He wasn't fast enough coming over to cover the bag. He glanced up, saw that, then took his eye completely off the ball because he had to snag it and then make a break for the bag.
And the ball was spinning off the end of the bag.
Yeah, there was it was a lot of English, and the only reason I remember that was because I was on Skyline Drive with your stepmom, and we were on a little vacation up there. And, we watched it in the motel that night.
I saw it at the bowling alley with one of my friends. I was with his parents bowling.
Yeah.
we were sitting at the snack bar eating cheese fries and watching the World Series.
Well, they did not win. They were not in the playoffs again until 1999, from 86 to 99. In 2012, they had their first no-hitter thrown as a Met by Johan Santana. Now, what was significant about that was the manager left him in the game to pitch the no-hitter, and he threw 130-some pitches or something like that, and he never was the same pitcher after that. Never. They traded him in Minnesota, and he was never the same pitcher after that game. Now, a New York Met pitcher won the Cy Young that year, but it wasn't Santana. It was R.A. Dickey. He won the Cy Young Award. In 2015,
we got traded to Toronto.
Yeah. In 2015, they lost in 6 games to the Kansas City Royals. And in 2016 was their last time in the playoffs till the end of that decade. But during that decade, near the end of that decade, they had a young man that my son really liked a lot named David Wright. And at the end of the decade, after several back surgeries and back problems, he retired. They also had a guy named DeGrom, who's a decent pitcher when he's not hurt. He won 2 Cy Youngs. And then they had Pete Alonso, who was a rookie, set the record for 52 home runs ever by a rookie in a season, and that was in 2019. Then later on, they hired Carlos Beltran as their manager, and that was a fiasco because he was involved with the Houston Astros with the trash can beating thing. Yeah. Come to find out, he was one of the ringleaders. He was one of them that came up with the idea to do that. So he was supposed to be their manager. The players loved him, but they got rid of him because he was it was bad publicity. Then we talked about Steve Cohen buying the team, and then he wanted to win quick, so he signed Verlander and Scherzer. Well, he got Scherzer first, then he signed Verlander, but that we just saw how that didn't work out. So hopefully they're going to. That's my son's favorite team, so I root for him a little bit because that's my son's favorite team. I can't do it with the Cowboys. I just can't. But the Cowboys, I can't do it. Cannot. But with the Mets, I can root for the Mets. But they had other guys that were on their team for a while, like Tom Glavine, Ricky Henderson. Gil Hodges managed them for a while, the old Dodger first baseman. Pedro Martinez, of course, was on that team. Willie Mays, as you mentioned, Roberto Alomar, Piazza, Nolan Ryan, Warren Spahn.
Piazza is known for the
broken back.
Clemens with the Subway Series.
The broken bat.
Yeah, the broken bat thing, and I love Piazza as a Met. I thought he brought another guy that brought some class, if you want to say, to the organization.
Well, it was when at Pudge Rodriguez, when he went to the Nationals for a couple of years with the Nationals, he brought some sort of semblance of dignity, right. And he brought something to the clubhouse.
Well, Piazza, when he came there, I don't think you put another. You take another all-star catcher. I don't know if they get to that series, right?
Yeah.
With Piazza, they get there.
Well, Yogi
just
Berra
had a swagger about him after being with the Dodgers. That was something special. You just knew something special.
Now, Roberto Alomar was on that team, and Yogi managed them for a year or two. I forgot, but he was
right. He was a player manager, and then he managed.
And I've got to tell you this story because this is one of those when they were going through all their losses and all that in 62, 63. They were still the lovable Mets. Everybody, because they were so bad, everybody loved them. Right. So anyway, they were out in Los Angeles playing the Dodgers. Casey Stengel had his 124th birthday or whatever. It was 80th birthday or something. The Dodgers brought a cake and everything out in the middle of the diamond. And they had a birthday cake and they had a birthday party and the crowd was applauding old Casey and that. They come back to New York in the Polo Grounds. Dick Stewart is playing first base. They called him Stone Hands and Dr. Strangelove. There was an old movie called Dr. Strangelove. Well, they called him Dr. Strangelove because he made more errors than any first baseman.
Right.
So after the game's over, they're in the clubhouse, and he hollers over at Casey Stengel. He said, "Hey, Skipper, tomorrow's my birthday. Are y'all going to give me a cake?" And Casey was standing at his office door, and he said, "We'd give you one, but you'd probably drop it."
Right.
And so, I mean, it was said in front of the sports reporters in New York. Of course, that story got out into the papers and on television. That's funny. I mean, that's one of those vignettes in sports, and especially in baseball. Yeah, we'd give you one, but you'd probably drop it. That was.
I've never heard that story. That's pretty cool. If I have, I've forgotten it.
Well, I saw. They had Yogi Berra at an All-Star game. They had Yogi Berra before a couple of days, when they had the break the day before and the day after.
Yeah.
Sitting in the box seats doing an interview. I think Kurt Gowdy was doing the interview. They had Casey Stengel, Yogi Berra, and Ted Williams. Ted Williams never said a word because he couldn't stop laughing. The whole interview, I think Kurt Gowdy asked 3 questions, and Yogi and Casey Stengel just took it from there. And it was so funny. Ted Williams couldn't stop laughing. He couldn't answer any questions.
Yeah,
I remember that. I don't remember any of the specific questions.
There's a book that you can buy of just Yogiisms, right?
I got it.
Yeah, and Casey Stengel,
book.
there's a great book on him as well, and his little one-liners and stuff. Yeah, I mean.
Well, he's the one that said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it.
Right.
And he went to a pizza place in New York when he was with the Yankees, and he ordered a pizza after the game, and he was going to take it home. And the guy said, "You want to cut in 12 slices or 8?" And he said, "You better cut it in 8 because I won't be able to eat 12." And these are he called his wife. There was a game they were playing in Detroit, I think, and he called back to New York and asked his wife how the kids were doing, and she said, I took them to see Dr. Zhivago today. And he said, "What's wrong with them now?" He thought they were sick. I mean, these are the things you read that book and it's so hilarious.
Yeah. It's great characters, and the Mets had some great characters in that clubhouse through the years, especially those early years there. And of course, you said it. That's my favorite team since 1985 when Gary Carter came over there with Keith Hernandez and that group. That's why I had to point out. I started playing first base, and I mimicked. I was a right-handed Keith Hernandez fan. He was left-handed, but I played it very aggressive first base like he played, and really took after him a lot. So yeah, that's the Mets. Hopefully, they had high hopes this year. Hopefully it comes back next year. They got a good team. They need a starting pitcher. I think Senga might end up in the top 5 for Cy Young in the National League, and maybe top 5
I watched
for
him pitch
Rookie
the
of the
other
Year.
night. He was outstanding. I mean, they
Well,
couldn't touch him.
the issue with him, and I brought this up before, was Japanese pitchers only pitch once every 7 days. When they come over here, they usually get tired, and his goal this year was to pitch the complete season, and without having to stretch starts or do other things like they've had to do for other pitchers that came over. And because of that, a little side note, there's another Japanese pitcher coming over next year, and he has the same he's already got the same manager or whatever guy working his contracts for him as Senga,
His agent.
as Senga and Edwin Diaz as the same agent them two have. So
is he coming to the Mets?
They haven't. You know how the Japanese is. You have to pay to talk to them. You got to pay to play, and then you got to pay the guy. So, but it looks like the Mets are the forerunners in getting. So that might be the first team to have like a 2 Japanese pitchers, and I guess these 2 guys are friends as well. And so it's looking very good. This guy's supposed to be one of the top pitchers in Japan this year. So interesting to see, and if he's got the fighting heart that Senga has, because Senga had a tough first part of this season, but he's now number 3 in ERA in the league right now. If his Japanese believe their walks is what's really hurting him, but in Japan it's different. They don't give in. So if it's 2-1 or whatever, they're not going to put one down the middle of the plate. They're just not going to.
Maddox was the same way. He didn't give in. He would walk somebody rather than give them something to drive out of the park.
But American baseball has kind of turned to that way of Japanese baseball, where you've talked about it before. It's a lot of 3-2 counts, batters and pitchers giving up pitches. It's just it's kind of turned to that type of game. So that's kind of how it is. And, hopefully the other thing I would love to see in American sport is some of the enthusiasm in the crowds. I know it's kind of tough, long season, hot summers, but we have great enthusiasm in the crowds now. But Japanese, if you watch Asian baseball at all, like
they had the Korean leagues on during the pandemic.
Yeah, KBO or whatever it's called. Korean baseball organization, I think.
Right. Well, they have cheerleaders and everything in baseball over there.
Yeah, they're more like chant leaders instead of. I mean, whatever. I guess. You can call them kind of whatever, but yeah, they do. It's just a little different over there. So I would love to go over there and catch some ball games. I think it'd be awesome. It's on my bucket list one day. Get to check off one of my bucket lists here coming up in another month or so. More coming about that later. But this, we were talking before, I'm still paying attention to games, but I'm in playoff mode. I want the playoffs to start tomorrow. I don't want to hurry up and get the season over with, but man, it's just that time of year where I'm just ready for the playoffs and having very meaningful games going on. Even though it's fun to watch these National League guys, even though I can't. The Reds are playing the Mets. I can't watch the games because it's blacked out. In Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Makes a lot of sense. But that being said, Ed, anything closing for this week?
No, just like we did the Cubs and the White Sox back to back, I think I'll go ahead and do the Yankees next week, and that will take care of the 2 teams that are in New York right now.
Right. So with that, please watch the games, enjoy the rest of this season. Like I said before, If you can, watch some Miguel Cabrera, at least catch some highlights. Watch his last games at certain stadiums, see what they do for him. The old Rock. I'm sure he's going to be getting a rocket chair somewhere. They've been calling him old man and everything else at these games. Very touching the other night. Him and Votto. I don't know if anybody saw that on first base. Votto gave him a big bear hug. Votto's been awesome the last couple of years. He's really come out of his shell. I think he's trying to set up his next step in his career.
He's getting ready for his farewell tour.
Yeah, so just things like that to look forward to, and also just the games, man. Let's see what Olsen can do with home runs, and it marches on. So until next time, like, share, tell a friend. Hello to my new subscribers. Thanks for all the kind words that we've been getting in the messages. And until next time, see ya.